here's the thing about Germany, why I made a curator's pick of the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Community, heart,
This is Like It Is Radio, Black Intelligent Talk Radio.
Well, here we are again. Nothing but the facts. Good afternoon. We have the opportunity to dialogue with a candidate running for our local sheriff, if you will, in the form of Mr. Tim Bedwell. So I'll let y'all know we're going to talk about some things. He's been making the rounds, trying to get our vote, trying to get the community to develop some type of awareness to some of the programs in his platform he wants to implement. As always, got to give a big shout out to Simo. He's not here right now, and my man Crayzon Deeyon. You know, we put it down. We're right here just trying to figure it out, getting to you. Nothing but the facts. So without any further ado, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule and a Herculean effort you're putting into being a sheriff, a term that may not be familiar to a lot of other individuals in different capacities because most of them have police commissioners or superintendents. Right. But the local sheriff here in this county, and is it in the entire state, I guess, they're all elected officials?
Right, all the sheriffs in Nevada are elected.
And that's been from its inception. So you can support your local sheriff by getting out there and voting and finding out some of the things that they're offering to change or implement or make better. And safety, the topic that we have right here, right now. Is Nevada okay? I mean, there's a lot of influx of tourists and all kind of stuff. We know we just lived through the horrific event of, October the 1st. So is Nevada still safe?
Yes, Nevada's safe.
Good.
A lot of exciting things going on in Nevada right now with the Raiders coming here. Hockey's taken off like wildfire. But there's a lot going on here. A lot of people are coming, and yes, Nevada is safe. Las Vegas is safe.
Good.
Quite frankly, I think if the sheriff would be a little more open, we wouldn't ask that question as often. So I think we really need to find a place that we can, turn the corner from the October 1 thing, and just tell the public we learned from it, and we're moving forward, and you're safe on the Strip.
So when you say the Strip, I recognize a lot of people just think Las Vegas is just a strip, but
Sure.
The entire entity of this Clark County, this expansive piece of land, is under the purview and the jurisdiction of what will be your position as sheriff in terms of safety, correct?
Right, and you brought up initially with the fact that it's an elected position. When the Las Vegas City Police Department and the Clark County Sheriff's Office merged, one of the things that was written into the legislation was that the sheriff, there would be an elected sheriff as the top person in the county, and that elected person would represent as the sheriff in the entire county. So even if you have a chief of police, you may live in North Las Vegas, for example, They have a chief of police. However, the sheriff is your sheriff there as well.
So that's the number one law enforcement agency, I guess. Is that considered Metro's the number one law enforcement agency?
I don't know if I would categorize it that way, but I would. But it's very clear that the sheriff is the top law enforcement person in the county. He is the boss, the supervisor of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and they have designated places they patrol outside of, in the unincorporated county, all of Las Vegas City, Laughlin, anything that isn't covered by another police chief. But anything that requires the sheriff's attention still goes to the Clark County Sheriff, no matter where you live in the county.
Okay, so let's talk about you since you're here, you're running for this. What's your Nevada history, so to speak? If you have, how long have you been here, where area you're from, and all that kind of stuff? Because I know constituency here like to know they have local representation, if you will.
Absolutely. I'm not from here. I actually grew up in Colorado, but I left Colorado when I was 17 to join the Marine Corps.
Hoorah.
Hoorah, Semper Fi. So I grew up in the Marine Corps, and I traveled the world. In 1995, I retired with 20 years in the Marine Corps, and I became a police officer.
Thank you for your service.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
So I did 6 years as a police officer in Arizona, and I came here in 2001, and the only place I looked and where I got hired off my resume was in North Las Vegas. I've been a police officer in North Las Vegas since 2001.
Okay, so.
And then I retired last year to run for this office.
Oh, wow. So you were actually just always been in some type of, disciplined areas, from the Marine Corps to the military,
Yes,
into the police force. So how does the police force factor into where and since you've seen the world and the things that are happening in top tier things, how's Las Vegas stacking up?
I think Las Vegas stacks up well. one of the things that I believe the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and Clark County need is to bring in someone who has a broader scope of experience than just having been a police officer at Metro. Metro has a history of the sheriff comes all the way up through Metro and then becomes the sheriff, sort of hand-picking the successor, so to speak. I have a much broader range of experience. I've been in charge of security at embassies throughout the world. I've done all kinds of things in the military, but my law enforcement experience in particular gives a broader stroke of the way policing is done in different places. One thing that if you work at the same police agency all your entire career, you kind of think you all do it right and nobody else really gets it.
Okay.
That's not true. Every police agency has its own positives and negatives. I think it's good to have a broader range of experience, and that's what I want to bring to Metro.
When you say a broader range of experience based on other things that you've done, and this being a world-class city, the institutional stuff that I guess you're referring to in terms of making changes within the organization, how much structural organizational change background do you have, or the mentality, or whatever that proper term would be, if such a term exists?
Well, my experience in this comes from both being in the experience, it also comes from education. I have a master's degree in criminal justice organizational management. So I understand leadership from sort of a three-faceted way, but the two most important parts are running the organization. So you have a command staff around you. The span of control that a person can manage directly, people, is usually about 6 to 10 bodies.
Right.
As the sheriff, I would run Metro through the command staff. I'm not going to come down and tell the captains what to do or the lieutenants what to do. We'll manage and we'll set the organizational culture based on the leadership group. The other thing, though, that the sheriff does is the sheriff is everyone's sheriff. There's a political aspect to that. There's a sort of an inspirational aspect to that. So what I want to change at Metro is the outreach to the public, and so that everyone knows that the sheriff, as sheriff, I am your sheriff.
Right.
Because there are too many people now that don't even recognize that the sheriff is their sheriff in Clark County.
Okay.
And I think that's simply from a lack of exposure. I think the sheriff needs to be more present in that sort of inspirational mode of leadership, where I sit down with community leaders and we discuss what needs to be done and we look at the problems. And we don't just say, well, you need this kind of policing.
Okay.
We ask you, what kind of policing do you want? And how do we make it fit with you? And that changes from neighborhood to neighborhood.
So would that be a format of community policing, for lack of a better term?
Right, and that is what most people, say they're talking about when they discuss community policing is actually having that interaction and because quite frankly, let's look at it this way. As a police officer, I'm simply the person that you've hired to do this job, but it's all of our responsibility to protect our neighborhood.
Definitely.
I'm just the person you pay to lead that, but I have to have those inroads with the neighborhood, with the community. That is community policing.
So when you think about that, the community policing, a lot of the different communities as Vegas has grown, the demographic has changed.
Right.
Does that mean there'd be more, not necessarily recruitment isn't up to standard, but is there a better inroad that under your administration we can look forward to making those communities more reflective of the police who police those communities?
Two things evolve. A neighborhood evolves and public safety evolves. So where we have to come together, I have to know what it is that's happening in the neighborhood. And like you said, as a neighborhood matures, for example, you see a great deal of change in the demographics. If you still police it in the same way it was policed 15 years ago, you're probably not doing it the best you can. Also, we know that policing has changed. If we're still doing policing in general the way it was done 15 years ago, we're probably not doing the best we can. Because we've learned that public safety is more than just law enforcement. Law enforcement's an aspect of it. But the responsibility, the first responsibility of the police department is to be your public safety professionals.
But when you say that professional, I mean recognizing that the job and the responsibilities have changed, the professional that's not always exhibited can now be caught on a body cam.
Right.
Would you be able to install or make it better resulted orientated? Because like even back to unfortunately October 1, there were a lot of people who were out there, a lot of officers in fact, who had body cams. We didn't get a lot of body cam footage or whatever it was that would have been normally released under the regular protocols. Under your administration, would those body cams and things like that become mandatory?
Body cameras are really important. They're emerging technology. And I will tell you that when I first saw that they released the video of the entry into the room on the 32nd floor where Paddock fired from, I saw that the lead person did not have their body camera on. My wife looked at me and said, how could this happen? And so I explained it to her. The problem with body cams is many police agencies don't train with them on. They only operate with them on.
Okay.
We do in under stress, we do what we're accustomed to doing in training. The one thing I would implement immediately in light of this, looking at the video, SWAT team members should always be told to put their video cameras on. Their body cameras should be on all the time when they're in training. The reason for that is we go through this sort of checklist. As a SWAT member that's going into a room where someone's shooting and killing people, it's a very dangerous job.
For sure.
So you go through a checklist in your mind. Do I have this? Do I have that? Do I have this? Do I have that? And when you do that, you do a self-examination. And then you do that with your partners as well. Once you're all ready to go, you go. If the body camera isn't one of those things you examine when you're getting ready to go through the room in training, you won't put it on in real life. Now that goes over to patrol as well. Police officers should be given a body camera when they get to the police academy. They should be taught to turn it on in the exact same instances they would be using them when they're actually in the field. It should become actual muscle memory. It should become as important to them as drawing their firearm.
Well, recognizing that the control mechanism, I don't know if it's possible because of the union that's so strong, that whenever they exit the car, but recognizing things happen within the car, and I know the computer space, you would need to have it on 24 hours a day. Is that even like a feasible reasonability to say that when somebody gets out of the car, it comes on, or somehow automatically the system engages it?
Yeah, there are systems that engage the camera when you get out. I don't know what system Metro is using at this point. I'll examine that when I get in office. But we don't want to rely solely on the technology. And if we have something that is supposed to fire automatically and not take a human input, then we could have that fail. So my preference is a two-sided system where you both turn it on and it should come on at the same time. Those two things should happen and be triggered. There are a range of other issues. There are a number of other issues we have to deal with regard to cameras, though, because there are still issues with regard to coming into your home. As a police officer, if I get called to your home, you may not have called me. So I come to your home and you may immediately challenge me over your privacy over the video. That hasn't been fully settled in court yet. So we need to address that, and the agency needs to lead that address. I don't think we can say to you, well, we have to wait and see what the courts say. I think we need to say to you, we're going to do what we think is right, and if the courts tell us to do it differently, we'll change.
Well, the courts would have to mandate the change after what's been highlighted by your reporting, basically.
That's what I believe. I believe we need to be as open and transparent as possible. And if the courts trim that back, that's up to the court. But as an agency, we should work to be as transparent as possible, rather than the other way around. I don't want to be less transparent, and then you have to sue because you don't have it on, and then the courts tell us to do it more often. You see, I think it's better to err. I'm not trying, and here's the reason. If I take a video inside your home and the courts determine that that shouldn't be released to the public, they can do that. So you ultimately have a privacy safeguard in that the courts can tell us not to use the video, but if we don't take the video, it's gone.
Well, speaking of some of the videos that you do, the police Metro does have, would you, under your tenure, would they possibly be released sooner, recognizing that the parameters of the court case and impending things like that? Would that be more expedient under your term?
I think the only legitimate reason, there's really only two legitimate reasons to not release video. The first is privacy, and the second is the not injure an investigation, criminal investigation. But we are seeing nationwide, and I think we need to implement this more here, where the video is released earlier, as soon as possible, within a couple of days. Because quite frankly, We should have those early interviews done within a day or two. What does the officer say happened? What do the people say that happened? And then let's release the video to the public, or what parts of it that we can, so that you have an understanding of the basis of the conduct. You may not know the totality of it. The fear by too many police supervisors now is that if you only see the snippet of a video, you may miss a great deal of information. That's true, but it's my belief the public can handle being told this is part of it, as long as we're being proactive. So if we bring you the video and if we know at the front of it that it may not tell the whole story, we tell you, this video doesn't tell you some other things that we have as evidence in this case. So don't jump to conclusions based solely on the video. And quite frankly, we've had horrific cases where the video showed a police officer doing something terribly bad. We dealt with that because they released it. If the police officer needed to be charged, he was. That has happened here in Las Vegas, in fact, where the police officer is charged. So put the video out. And then we'll discuss the prosecution as we go. And that's up to you, though. Do you think it's better to go ahead and put the video out earlier, even if it doesn't tell the whole story?
Even if it does, sometimes it eases the family pain. They want to see the last bits of circumstances that they can probably draw whatever it is they want to draw from it, that type of conclusion. Unfortunately, it usually ends up, not even with the videos. We know we've gone to court with videos and the cases have gone, whatever your term would be, the families felt that they were slighted. It was justice at its best because we got to see it, and whether it was Zimmerman or Tallahassee Brown, who was just recently here, at least you see the processes engaged. But talking about that, some of the departments, what's your background in the enforcement? What departments have you worked in?
So I was a deputy sheriff for Yuma County, Arizona. I left there as a detective in 1988, and I moved to the Phoenix Valley. I worked in Gilbert, Arizona, which is a Phoenix suburb, from 88 until 2001. I came up here in 2001 and decided to move here, and it was family reason I wanted to move to the Valley. So I came here in 2001 and became a police officer for North Las Vegas. I worked there for the 16 years that I put in there. I was the public information officer. A lot of people know me from the 2004 to about 2007 timeframe. I was a public information officer. And later I was also the spokesman a couple of times, or many times actually, for the organization. Even up to the rank of lieutenant, I still spoke for the organization. So I've worked in SWAT in 2 different agencies. I've been a field training officer in 3 different agencies. I have run the field training office for North Las Vegas. I've run recruiting, background investigations, special investigations. I've run the fatal investigation team. I've run patrol squads as a sergeant and as a lieutenant. I've worked in the office of the chief for several years, doing basically the chief's lieutenant job. The chief's office does a number of different things. It just sort of, nobody has a specific responsibility for. You work for the chief, so I did that for many years. So I have, and as I said, my education is also is in criminal justice.
So you've always loved the law?
This is interesting. I have a brother who was in prison when I was young. He's 9 years older than me, and from the age I was age 8 until I was 9 until I was 17, I went to the prison almost every Sunday to see my brother, and so I have a different sort of outlook on law enforcement. I didn't come into law enforcement until I was 37 years old. I have a lot of life experience, not inclusive of law enforcement. My Marine Corps time, I did some things that were similar. I mean, I was in charge of security at embassies, so there was a law enforcement component to that, but I wasn't a police officer.
Right.
And I didn't really even think about becoming a police officer until 1992. And then, because I was trying to determine whether I would stay past 20 in the Marine Corps or change careers. So I decided to change careers. Before that, I never really thought about being a police officer.
Really? Oh, wow. Well, as you said that, with the sheriff purview, would that also handle the Department of Corrections out here also? Does that fall under him?
The sheriff doesn't have Department of Corrections, which falls under the state, so he doesn't have the prison system. However, the sheriff manages 3 jails. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has 3 jails here in Clark County. CCDC is the biggest. Okay. Clark County Detention Center.
Right.
So the sheriff is, yes, also the sheriff for all of the corrections officers, and quite frankly, the sometimes forgotten people that work for Metro, dispatchers, records clerks. I mean, there's a vast number of people that work at Metro, almost 6,000 of them, that ultimately are under the sheriff.
So as now we're talking about the total 6,000 and the new thing in Vegas, these dispensaries and the laws changing around that. Is there any increase, or is there projected increase due to the legalization of marijuana? I mean, just a projection, possibly.
Right. I don't know that I would want to project it. I know they keep statistics at Metro. I don't know that they keep statistics in the way that I would like. I like comprehensive statistical information with regard to a volume of things, the type of crimes that occur, so that I could answer this question. But I don't think it's been legal long enough now to really have a thorough understanding of what is affected. There are a number of things that we have concerns about. We have concerns about, access to drugs by children, not only for marijuana, but also for opioids and all the other stuff that's out there. So those are concerns. We have a concern about driving. It really hasn't, I don't think we've decided for sure how we're going to deal with driving and marijuana and being able to know if a person's impaired. We know that you're not impaired on marijuana for 28 days, but you might show in your system for 28 days. So that's an unfair way to determine whether a blood test, for example, it may be an unfair way to determine whether you're actually impaired. So we have to work on those things. But the fact of the matter is that this is one of the things where the sheriff is absolutely responsible to the public to implement the law that you ask for. The public has said we're going to have legalized marijuana. There is no reason to fight that, even if you're opposed to it. So what we need to do is work with the community to ensure that the things we need to do to prevent children from getting a hold of marijuana more easily in your home, just like opioids and other prescription medication, and also to find a way to determine the impairment levels and a way to test them.
Right, I guess that's going to be important because that's what I figured would generate a little bit more income due to the interaction of people who may be high on these drugs and the police while they're driving, or even just down on the strip partying and things of that nature. Because people are coming here for that, similar to they did in Colorado years ago. So even within the confines of running within youth and the crime in the neighborhoods, we see a lot of gang stuff, both sides of town, all sides of town. Is that the gang unit? I know there's always a lot of questions, especially within the African American community, some of the practices they have implemented. Right. Would you think any changes that you could foresee you'd like to tell us about? Because I know that they're still here, there's still gangs, and I know that the unit, I believe, is a different title and things of that nature, but some of the practices that they've used over the years, do those need to possibly be re-examined?
I think the first thing I want to do is put the gang unit back, because it was decentralized or disbanded, depending on how you hear the story. Nonetheless, we need the gang unit because we need to not have things like the recent MS-13 homicides. Then we cannot allow that to happen. We've just had another shooting the other day where only innocent victims, bystanders, were shot, and it was a gang incident. What I don't want to do is I don't want to come back into the neighborhoods with a gang unit that wants to bump its statistics up by looking to label people as gangsters.
As in, no offense, as in the past, some of the people who would refer that happened here.
That has happened here, and I wouldn't allow that to happen again. What I would gauge the gang unit's effectiveness is going to be more on actually dealing with true gang members who are part of an organized gang, not 17-year-old, high school kids who put their own little clique together of 7 people. We're not going to label them gangs. So I would be very strict on what the parameters are to say that to label someone as a gangster, which by law in Nevada is very well controlled anyway because of past problems. But I think we need to go that extra mile to be able to ensure people, particularly in the Black community and in the Hispanic community, where there is this tendency to over-label, because it is each individual, one individual that we incorrectly label as a gang member, we could literally ruin that person's life. We don't want that done. So we need the gang unit back, but we need them to focus on criminal gang activity and the persons that are involved in those very crimes, not just neighborhood people.
So a broader search of what's happening, because they also control the drug market, the underground drug market that still exists even though we have legalization of marijuana.
And it will always exist.
Really?
Yes. I don't think that legalized marijuana will do away with the illegal sale of marijuana. I do believe that it could make a difference in certain economic places, so certain neighborhoods, but I don't know that it's going, well, I sincerely believe that we have illegal alcohol sales. And alcohol is a multi-billion-dollar national industry, and there's still illegal alcohol sales. So we'll still continue for years, I think, dealing with marijuana, and honestly, until it's changed federally, the state changes will never, in my mind, be codified for certain, because you know that companies now always know that the federal government could still shut them down. So I think that at a national level, the federal government needs to address it.
They probably would, but then they would maybe enforce it all the way around in terms of the laws of the country being unified. It's just like in the military, they're all unified. So if it's got to be here in Colorado, then California, Nevada, New York, it's Florida, it's going to be unified regardless. If that's the way that goes, looking at the future, especially with the youth, a lot of these individuals have grown up under a time when it was legal.
Right.
Would that affect law enforcement practices in terms of the hiring of those individuals? Because if you want people who are reflective of the community, a lot of them would have to have had some type of background in marijuana, or the use of it, or the testing of it, as college kids would say, you know.
Yeah, I think that we need to be really cautious. That's why I wish the federal government would act. I think they're going to legalize it at some point. You're right, they could do the opposite. But until they actually act, states are kind of out there in a certain respect, because there's clauses in the Constitution that say that things are supposed to be generally the same from state to state, and they're not right now. So one of the biggest problems for people now is they go to Colorado buy marijuana, and we're probably going to see this here, and when they leave to go back to Kansas, they get arrested for interstate transport of drugs, a federal crime. Right. So it's, and then they may not know.
Would that be fun? Because I travel a lot. I see a lot of Metro at the airport.
Right.
So who would do that, intervention if they were found with suspicious things?
If it's in the airport, you can be arrested. So,
well, who arrests you, Metro or Feds?
Well, that's a good question.
Okay.
That's a question I actually don't have an answer for.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll take that as a
we're going to look at
thumbs
that
up.
one,
Yeah, because it generates income. That's another side of the bar of the marijuana business. Unbeknownst to the regular citizen is there, like I said, the protective measures that would come into individuals driving high, trafficking it, moving it, and the incarceration behind it with large amounts. Because
well, the problem also with the incarceration is we have to look at how far back do we go expunging records. Because do we get the person that, the week before the law changed, do we go back and expunge their records? Probably.
Is that something you would examine?
How about absolutely. I would sit down with the district attorney's office and I would determine what we could do with that.
Okay. Voting points. Well, recognizing that there are people who are incarcerated due to this traffic prior to the law. I guess you'd have to figure out how long they've been in and all like that. But that also precludes them, because it's a felony, from working in the business. Right. So it's hand. But as we talk about streamlining and stuff like that, one of the things that goes on in terms of the investigation, like as you said, you were in the Marine Corps, and so was I. Support a dirty devil dog, 0311.
Oh, so that's a real man.
Yeah. Paris Island and all. But
me too.
As we look at that, the punishment from under the UCMJ, it's pretty much adjudicated the same way, having that background. That if you're being court-martialed in Nevada or Navy or Air Force, even the Coast Guard, the same procedures followed in that adjudication. We don't always see that when it comes to, unfortunately, the loss of life or police-involved shootings. Different things are adjudicated different way. Would you think about examining or putting forth investigations to legislate it the same way? This is like if this happens in Kentucky, these are the 5 things we're going to look at first. If it happens wherever it is, whatever the investigation process would be, to streamline it, to make it the same organizational regardless of the department. Is that something that possibly could be examined?
So the UCM, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ, which is the court system you operate under in any military service. So for others that may not be familiar with it, the UCMJ controls how you can be punished and the court system as an active duty person, no matter where you are, anywhere in the world, the rules are exactly the same. And that's why the Uniform Code of Military Justice was brought into being. So now, your question is a valid one. I think we have to have a national discussion. The debate needs to take place where we determine what are the reasonableness ideas with regard to how we operate as police officers with deadly force. But I will say this, America has a separation of powers. So as sheriff, I'm not in the legislative branch. The legislative branch makes the laws, and I'm not in the judicial branch. The judicial branch is the one that would have to come up with these. Actually, I should say this was better in a different way. The judicial branch is where that power resides right now, because it's the judicial branch that if the judges here do something wrong, then it gets appealed. It will go to the circuit court. If we don't, and then it gets appealed again, it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that is the method for fixing. That's the remedy currently. If we were going to have a remedy at the executive branch level, as a sheriff, I would be an executive branch person. We carry out the operations that we're told to. And which quite frankly is why it's different from state to state, because you fall under state law. I can't do something the way they do it in Kentucky if Kentucky's state law differs from our state law. If someone's rights are violated in those two places, though, we still go back to the judicial branch to determine whether that was correct or not, whether it was in Kentucky or here, no matter of what the state law says, because that's the national level branch of government that then would come down and say, in Nevada, you're doing it wrong. Okay. But I still think that and it's going on right now. There's already this discussion nationally about this. And I think what we need to go back to here in Nevada is a better relationship between the neighborhoods and Metro. I'm told, and I've been gone for almost a year from policing, I'm told by people both inside the organization, Metro, and on the streets in North Las Vegas, West Las Vegas, that it has slipped. There were some people who were in positions that were very trusted here, and they've moved on for whatever reasons. I would want to get that trust back. Metro's a very good agency, has phenomenal police officers who truly care about the neighborhoods. I want to make sure that those dialogues are all happening. And one thing that I differ from some other police administrators, I don't just think it's the area command captain's responsibility to be down here. It's my responsibility to come down in every neighborhood and discuss with the people of the neighborhood, both the leaders of the neighborhood and just people who maybe don't feel like they have a voice, to give them opportunity to talk to the sheriff, and then make certain also that I have good staff up here that understands the problems, is consistently involved, and listens.
All right, well, that's the important thing, listening, because that goes both ways, and the time you spend with us, we really appreciate. As you think about some of the things for the future, as I said, within the organization and the recruitment and the things that you would like to change, as we try to wrap up whatever's happening, that implementation of making the structural changes to the police officer, it takes a little while to get down to the actual level that you may implement at your area. Would sensitivity training be part of it, or is that already incorporated into what Metro does? Because recognizing they have a new class and everybody's coming out, I just saw a lot of those folks are kind of young. And when you look at that, is sensitivity training something that they included, not just for the Hispanics, for the blacks, I mean for all of them, because everybody probably needs it at a certain level?
In my first 6 months as sheriff, I'm going to attend these classes. All of the classes that Metro puts on now that are intended to help officers learn to de-escalate, for example, learn to communicate better, and learn to recognize their biases. I'm going to attend all of those classes at Metro and determine what we need to change. I'm going to audit those and determine if we're doing it right and what we may be doing wrong. There's always room for change. But you're right, it takes time to change the culture of an organization. But Metro right now, in my opinion, is ripe for serious change. And it's that way because morale among the troops is very bad. When an organization has low morale, officers are much more open to someone new coming in and making significant change. And so I can tell you one of the things I want to do at Metro that I think will benefit the officers as well as the citizens is I want to go away from the current warrior culture that is being driven home with police officers. It comes from a place that's understandable. There have been police officers who've been ambushed and murdered across the country at an alarming rate. It happened right here in Las Vegas. So police officers, we don't want them leaving a briefing with the idea that they're in a war. We want them leaving briefing safe, but with the idea that they're going to protect the community. The bad people who are killing police officers are a very, very small fraction of the public. Just like bad officers who murder someone are very, very small fraction. I knew one of them. So I know it happens. But we must not let our police officer culture become the mentality that you and I had in the Marine Corps. When we go into the Ville, everybody's a bad guy.
That's right. Take control.
That's not the case in policing. And we're swinging that too far to one way, and we need to come back. That, I think we can achieve at Metro easily because the police officers at Metro want to do the right thing.
Well, that's the most important thing, that they get home safe, because
They do have to go home safe.
It's just a job.
Yep.
If you're
Yes,
doing
sir.
it right, you don't have to worry. It's only if you're doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. But again, I guess as we get ready to get out of here, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with? Because recognizing that your candidacy for the sheriff, which is coming up in June, and the primaries is right here, right now. Is there a primary for that position?
That's the most important part of this race. On the 26th of May, just a few days from now, early voting starts. June 12th is the primary. Sheriff is a nonpartisan race, which means if either myself or the sheriff got over 50% plus one of the vote, it won't even be on the general election.
That's it.
If you care who the sheriff is, you must vote in the primary. And I can't think of, other than the district attorney, to me the district attorney and the sheriff's race are probably the two races that will actually have a great chance of touching everyone.
Right.
Now, each of the judges is important. You need to vote for the judges. But if you don't step up to who your sheriff and who your district attorney are, and you need to vote in this primary if you're going to decide that. But if you don't, then you really won't have a complaint. If the organization isn't doing what you want it to do, you need to vote in the primary.
And that's on both sides, Democrat and Republican. That's just running its own column.
Democrat, Republican, or even if you're nonpartisan or independent American, it doesn't matter what party you're a part of. The primary race, my race, for example, will be on everyone's ballot because it's a nonpartisan race. And not more importantly, but just as important as that, and we said this earlier, but some people just don't know it. You can live in Henderson, you can live in North Las Vegas, you could live in Mesquite, you have a police chief, you also have a sheriff.
It'll be on the ballot.
You need to vote for sheriff, and it'll be on your ballot.
And if they look at that, the counties that you just mentioned and all the cities you mentioned all within this county, the equity of bringing any of those departments as they had done, just because I recognize you'll be in charge of that, is that a performance mechanism to maybe make them all just one?
You know, we have a Metropolitan Police Department, so there's certainly the potential for that. It could be done. It isn't one of my campaign plans. It has been brought to my attention that there is some spirit for it, but I don't know what the measure of that is. I would be open to that discussion. Particularly, I would be open to discussing jails. And in most states, and even in Nevada, most police departments don't have a jail. The county usually runs the jail.
So the Department of Corrections per se, all is
Sort
one
of for
uniform.
the county, yes. Where that's not the case here. North Las Vegas just got rid of theirs, but the marshals have a jail. Henderson has a jail. I'm not saying I'm going to take those over. You know, I mentioned school police one day. I want to make schools safer.
Is that still under the purview of
Absolutely.
the sheriff?
No, it's not. The sheriff doesn't, and when asked about this, the sheriff actually said that's a school district problem. My belief is it's the sheriff's problem because the school is in the county. and they are terribly underfunded, and they do not have the resources to protect the schools. So I'm going to help do that. Now
Would that come under police for the
they
sheriff's
have a police
funding?
force.
But I mean, would that be merge your regular funding for them to supplement what they get from the school district?
I don't know. But I'm not going to wait. Just like when planes were flown into the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania into the ground and into the World Trade Center, the federal government didn't say, well, we'd like to make airplanes safer. They sent the National Guard. Our children are being murdered across the country in schools. One happened just today in California. We cannot continue to allow this. It can absolutely certainly happen here. Why would we wait until it happens here to do something? So I will have my schools, all our schools in each area command will be assigned to police officers. And they'll be responsible to know that school, know the people there, spend time there, protect those kids. Over the next 4 years as sheriff, I'll do what I can to get them better resources, and we'll find out whether, I don't really care if Metro absorbs the school police department or if the school police department continues to function. I would never make a school police officer a Metro police officer, and I would never make a Metro cop be a school police officer. But we can help them.
Right.
We can help them until they get on their feet and can protect the schools better. I'll do that on my first day.
Day one, there you have it, nothing but the facts. Tim, thank you so much for coming in.
Franklyn.
And how can they reach you, support you? Because I know some folks they're not your regular listeners, or they may not be reach a different kind of audience. But I know that they do have concerns, issues, and also just appreciate dialogue. How can they reach you?
I'm all over social media. Bedwell for Sheriff is my website, so bedwellforsheriff.com. I'm also Tim Bedwell everywhere on Instagram.
And it's easy to find because I've typed it in a couple of times.
Facebook.
And use a recognizable face. Anyway, if you've been in Las Vegas, you've seen the face around. And we do appreciate the time that you make to tell us at least
Thank you so
some
much.
of the things that are going on. And again, Lordland Films putting it down, nothing but the facts. But we look forward to dialoguing with you, hopefully after the primary, because the information you provided just now, talking about some of those subjects, a lot of our listeners, I said they weren't on that page, but now they know what page you're on. And that's the most important thing, nothing but the facts. SEMA, where you at? Lordland Films is always in the place to be. Thanks again for the time. This is what we do right here. You can always reach us. We are definitely on Cox Cable. Type in Lordland Films. You can see all the stuff that goes on, especially this interview. We'll get it up and running. Big shout out. Thanks again, Tim. Can I call you Tim or should I call you Sheriff? Because even the term local sheriff, support your local sheriff. I remember that movie. It was a great movie. But it is important that we understand the people in the diagnostics and some of the things that they have to go through to make us safe. It's not always pleasant. It's not always truthful. But the fact is, if you're talking about it, you're finding information about it, so you have to learn how to live within those confines. So again, thank you and appreciate that.
One more handshake.
Yeah, there you go. We're Marine Corps, shaking that foxhole. Anyway, we're out. Peace.
This is Like It Is Radio, Black Intelligent Talk Radio.